morning, everybody. So this week in school, our focus for the open lessons is to look at guided reading or one-to-one reading that you do with children in your class. So today I've got a volunteer with me. This is Mark, and we are looking at a story today called The Contraption. Mark, you've just read it. What did you think about it?
It's a really good story, and it's got a bit of suspense to it because at the end you don't really know what the whole story is based on.
Okay, so does it give you an ending, or does it leave on a bit of a cliffhanger?
It leaves on a bit of a cliffhanger.
Okay, right, brilliant. So basically this is just showing you what sorts of things we do in Year 5, and these are our guided reading. We take these from the literacy shed. And so the focus, so each passage or each guided reading session will have a different focus, and it says that on here. So our unit focus at the moment is magic and mystery, which goes with our old mill work that we are doing in class in literacy, and this is a narrative. Okay, this is a narrative story, and the focus for these questions is inference. And inference, when you infer something, is basically what you're doing is you're making and justifying inference using evidence from the text. So you're looking at the text and you're finding out why it is that someone's done something, okay? And that is what an inference is. But you'll also notice that there's questions down here, and each of these questions has letters on there, V, S, R, E, S, and they stand for VIPERS, which is vocabulary, infer, predict, explain, retrieve, and summarise. Okay, that's those. And so, as we go through, each of these questions will give you a different area to look at. So V, this question here, is a vocabulary question. So it says vocabulary means to find and explain the meaning of the words. And so that question says, which word or phrase tells you that Pippa is good at using steam to help her? So that will be somewhere within the text. And in a minute, yes, I'll get Mark to answer that one for us. We then have S, which comes at the very end of VIPERS, which is summarise. And that summarise the main ideas in one paragraph. So it says, what was the point of the wheel Hannah was turning? So in a minute, Mark's going to summarise that for us and find the answer. No pressure, Mark. Then we've got R, which is retrieve, which means you need to find something within the text. So we need to retrieve it and then record it. And so the question for that was, what was the name of Pippa's new creation? So that's retrieving information from there. Then we've got an E, which is when we come to E, and we find the paper, is explain. Okay, so it's an explanatory question. And so it says, why do you think the new creation is called infinitum? Okay, so again, it's...
I think it's infinitium.
Infinitium. I think it's infinitum, but still, there we go. We can have a little argument about that later, Mark. And then S, again, is a summarise. So it says, draw a label diagram of what you think the contraption might look like using evidence from the text. So all of the questions that we do have the VIPERS. So children are aware of the different types of questions, okay? But the focus on this one is inference. And what I'm going to do, so Mark would normally, what happens is children read through it and then they write down the answers, and I can go around and talk to them about it. But what Mark's going to do, Mark is going to explain the answers rather than write them down. So we're going to start off with the inference focus. And actually inference questions are quite difficult.
Yes.
Yeah, they're some of the harder ones.
Inference questions are questions which you kind of have to use the text and give your own ideas, because inference questions don't exactly have the answer within the text.
No, they don't. You're right. They're not always. You have to try and do some detective work. Deduction to try and work it out, yeah. So, should we have a go?
Yes.
Okay, so the first one says, how do you know that Hannah thinks Pippa is the more intelligent of the two?
Well,
what does she say?
She creates this new element, and she creates this huge contraption, and she looks like she's in charge of this whole science operation.
Okay.
So by my standards, it's because she's the one who started the idea, and she's the one who's made the contraption.
Okay, but is there anything in the text that tells you that because it's not actually Pippa that's saying she's the more intelligent, it's Hannah. So what does Hannah say? Because I think this is coming from Hannah's point of view, isn't it?
Yeah.
So what does she say there?
The contraption had been Pippa's idea. She was the brains behind the whole thing.
There we go. So I think that tells us, doesn't it, that she thinks that it's Pippa that is the brains behind the whole thing. That's why she thinks she's more intelligent.
Yes.
What do we know about Pippa's character, and explain how?
She's always trying to reach her goal.
Mm-hmm. How do you know that?
Because she's made the contraption,
Mm-hmm.
and she's trying really hard to make it work.
Right.
And also you can kind of find out that she's a bit bossy and wants nothing short of perfection. Because here, it says Pippa was her best friend, but she was so uptight about everything.
Okay. So she's a bit uptight, a bit grumpy at times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She wants nothing more than
perfection, which is fair enough. I'll tell you what, we'll go down to some of these questions just to have a bit of a different variation. So we've got this vocab question here. So do you want to read it out, Mark?
Which word or phrase tells you that Pippa is good at using steam to help her?
Okay, so which word or phrase tells us that Pippa is good at using steam to help her?
Okay.
So again, Mark is just looking through. He's looking through the text to see if he can find the answer to this vocab question. What do you think? Any ideas from that first bit there?
I think the reason that she's really good at it because she was the one who created it,
Mm-hmm.
so she knows, and she would have made a blueprint, so she knows exactly how it works, and I think she would have made other types of steam-powered contraptions in her past.
And it looks like that's what she's used. She's basically used steam. So if you've never used steam before, you're not going to use it again, are you? So I could imagine that is what's happening there. I like that, Mark. Thank you very much. Right, what was the point of the wheel Hannah was turning?
The point of the wheel that Hannah was turning, I think, you know how... So I feel like that the point of the wheel that Hannah was turning was kind of starting it all, because I've heard that in the olden days you didn't have a car key, you had to wind the thing at the start.
Okay, so it did, but how did it start it? I think it tells you there, Mark. If you have a little look.
By winding the wheel, she'd start to draw up water into the enormous sump up above. From there it would be turned into steam that would power the contraption.
So yeah, basically it was to start it, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, to bring that water up.
And once it was up to speed, she would have to stop, like in the olden day cars.
Nice. So that was S. That's a summarise, yeah?
Yes.
And now we're going for retrieve. What was the name of Pippa's new creation?
I think it's infinitum.
Infinitum. Infinitum. Infinitum or infinitum. So what was this new creation that she'd found then?
Infinitum was this. There, it says here. There, a wheel no bigger than a coin was mounted on an axis. As they both watched it spun and spun and spun, and it didn't stop. And here it says, infinitum actually generates energy when it gets hot. Pippa explains. The wheel on the bearing generates a small amount of heat through friction. This new liquid turns that heat back into more energy. It will never stop spinning.
Wow.
It's more of a cycle.
I like it. That sounds good. Like that. Why do you think the new creation is called infinitum? That's an E question, so that's an explain.
I think it's called infinitum, because when you say something's infinite, it's kind of like a loophole. It won't end.
Okay, so what won't it end? What won't it stop doing?
It won't stop creating energy from the heat of the friction.
Okay, so it doesn't stop spinning, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, nice.
And I think it would be kinetic friction.
Do you think it's a good name for it?
Yeah, infinitum.
Yeah, I think it's pretty good too. And then the last one says draw a label diagram, which I'm not going to ask you to do because that might take some time. Although it's quite a nice thing to do. What do you think the contraption might look like using evidence from the text? That's quite a nice one, isn't it? I like that question.
I'm just going to use kind of like a Willy Wonka's contraption when he made the gum.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Okay, so thank you very much, Mike. So again, just to summarise really, which is what we do. So when we do it, we use the VIPERS, VIPERS, and V is what, Mark?
Vocabulary.
Brilliant. What's I, Mark?
It's inference.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, P?
P is predict.
We didn't have a predict question. What's a predict question, do you think?
Predict what would happen next.
Yeah, what's going to happen next? What do you think's going to happen in the story? E?
E would be explain.
Explain, which is what you did
Yes.
when you explained about the contraption. Retrieve? R, sorry?
R, retrieve.
Thank you very much. Which is
And S is summarize.
Summarise, which you've done some of those questions there. So anyway, just a quick, really, tour of the sorts of things that we do in Year 5, the sorts of question types that we look at. And if you do want any of these VIPERS, that you could use at home, then I will post them actually on School Story or Class Story along with the explanations. And on these is really good because they have example questions. So if you're reading with your child, you can then use these example questions to ask them anything about their story. So these are really useful. So I'll make sure that they are there too. I'd like to say thank you very much to Mark because I threw that upon him this morning without him having any prior knowledge or practicing. So
Yes.
thank you very much, Mark. And thank you very much. I hope that was useful to some of you. Thank you. Take care.
Goodbye.
Bye.